Live from Capitol Hill, just yards from the our nation's capital. By the way, eventually we're going to get that. I know we're going to get that music fixed. It's War Room 2020, episode number 29, live on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Salem broadcast throughout the nation. America's Voice.news, which is the streaming platform of the Trump movement. Now, channel 219 on the Dish Network. I want to thank everybody in Colorado for making this happen. Also, FM 99.1 and 103.9 in Chicago, in the Chicago area. Jason Miller is my wingman. Sam still on injured reserve, right? We're going to try to get Raheem on on the show before the day's over, if we can fit him in. We got former Senator Spencer Abraham, the Secretary of Energy under President Bush, is going to be on to talk about this takedown of the American fracking industry by Saudi Arabia, our allies in Saudi Arabia and Russia. So we're going to get into all that later in the show. A tweet out from Hill TV. By the way, I love the Hill TV morning show. I think those guys rock over there. You got a populist perspective. You got a hardcore Bernie Sanders, Bernie Bros perspective. It's very enlightening. I think Jimmy Finkelstein and the team at the Hill do a great job over there. And they tweeted out today about your New York Post piece where you were quoted as a wartime president. This is back in January, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was picked up initially. I'd said it back in January, but then there's some recent interviews. Real Clear Politics, Philip Wegman had a story the other night that quoted me using the wartime president. Today's New York Post editorial page picked that up, and Sagar Enjeti from over at Hill and Hill TV, the show that he hosts with Crystal Ball.
Yeah, it's a great show.
He tweets out, Jason Miller in D.C. and Steve Bannon have correctly framed this from the beginning of this crisis. Trump is a wartime president. The response should mimic that footing.
Okay, what do we mean by that? And what does he mean by that? That the response. What do you mean by wartime president? What do you mean by the framing of that? And what do you mean about every action should mimic that?
Yeah. So when I first said wartime president, this went back to a conversation that a mutual friend of ours.
By the way, he stole it from me in pre-production. Just saying. But this is, you say, I always take care of my people.
But I applied it correctly.
You did. You were great.
Right. No, it's so a mutual friend.
By
of
the
ours,
way, I want to say something. There was tons of eye rolls too when you came out and did that. There was a lot of eye rolls. You know, what are you talking about? This thing's a nothing burger, etc. Right? And you were pretty adamant about it.
So a mutual friend of ours had a conversation with President Trump, even back, I think it was before he was actually even sworn in, or at the very beginning of the presidency, where he said to him that, look, all of the great presidents, those who've been carved into the side of Mount Rushmore, have essentially been wartime presidents, or the presidents who've led us through these extreme moments of crisis of national security. I talked a little bit about this in the Peter Baker column in yesterday's New York Times, where he talked about Lincoln. He talked about FDR on the good side. Then on the other side, you had your Hoovers, you had your Buchanans, you had other folks who failed at their moment. But it's always in the past,
it's always the crucible.
Yes. In the past, though, it's been your traditional kinetic wars, the North versus the South, the U.S. against the Axis powers, these traditional wars, and that we framed it. After 9/11, that changed the way that we thought about war. Then it became with non-state actors. Then it was terrorists, and
And you think about it, with Bush and Obama, we haven't handled that. The asymmetric warfare, we're still in these wars, so they haven't been able to step into the role and really seize the moment.
And the other thing about this, it's not just necessarily who we're fighting, but it's how it changes our way of life. And so I was talking to this with my 11-year-old yesterday. I said, you have to realize that from this moment forward, the rest of your life, certain things will change. The way that people do handshakes, the way that people do community events, all this is going to be different. I go, when I was a kid, when I went on to an airplane, we had this simple metal detector screening, but there was no TSA pat downs and that sort of thing. These types of things have been changed forever. When we now talk about the U.S. being at war, this isn't a war against either a state actor or non-state actor. It's now against a virus that doesn't care if it's from an ally, doesn't care if it's from a foe. It's attacking our health. It's attacking our economic security. It's attacking our very way of life. Things like handshakes, things like these community groups, things like testing, disaster preparedness. This is all going to change going forward. You're going to see cruise lines, for example. I'm skeptical as to whether or not the cruise industry, for example, will ever fundamentally recover. That is, this is or decades long until they're completely redone and reimagined how they are. So right now, that is what I talk about. Our nation, our way of life is under attack from this foreign virus. And let's be honest about what it is. It's a foreign virus. Don't buy any of this CCP nonsense. We are under attack. We are a nation at war.
So how do you, given that the president stepped to start that role Monday afternoon when he went down to the for the press briefing with the sense of gravitas, and then did the speech from the Oval Office on Wednesday night, which the world's capital markets did not applaud, but now we know some of the tensions as the stories have come out between the scientists, and particularly I think Dr. Birx, who is over there, is the specialist, the HIV specialist that came from the State Department and USAID to come in and really augment the team. And everything I've heard about her is fantastic. That she and Dr. Fauci actually led the argument of why you had to do Europe. So for all the mainstream media that's all over President Trump, about listening to the scientists, listening to the facts, they made the case. The finance guys, appropriately, Mnuchin and Kudlow said, hey, I think we got to work this through. The markets may not fully understand that, et cetera. The president did go and give his first wartime address. The capital markets did not respond. Obviously, he said, and he reiterated yesterday in the Oval Office, hey, my first priority is the health and safety of the American people. And once we get through that, the capital markets will respond. How do you think, as the first framing in his first address, was it laid out as a wartime president?
I think here's the thing you got to keep in mind.
And be brutally frank.
No,
One of the reasons the president loved you on the campaign and loved you in transition, all that, you have a unique way of stating your mind. And, hey, here's what I think, bang, bang, bang.
In true moments of crisis, you can't go and rely on past examples. You can't go and say that I'm going to do it like this other person did. When we talk about George W. Bush standing on the rubble and say, can you hear us now? That type of a moment. When you think about FDR doing the fireside chats and doing the kind of the consoler in chief, we're all going to get through this together. We're going to work through. Those are examples that aren't necessarily applicable here. In this moment of crisis, in this moment as a wartime president, President Trump has to continually show bold, dramatic action. People are not worried. There's no amount of happy talk that is going to make people feel good. They want to see numbers. They want to see the metrics as things move from. They want to know. And here's what it comes down to. It's not actually. Let me take that back. It's not the metrics on, the difference between 4,000 being tested a day versus 5,000 means nothing to people's lives. This goes down to the, essentially the pocketbook issue, but to your health. If I think that I have coronavirus, can I go get tested? That is what people want to know. Just that's it. That's it. That is the 15 cases versus 100 cases. That's not the big deal. People want to know that they can go and get tested. Or here's the thing. If our answer isn't great on that, by the end of the week, you're going to be able to have that.
The one thing I also tell people is to watch the continuum here. Still, the most powerful thing has been done is the president's wartime president, is the tough decision he made on the afternoon of January 31st, or the morning of January 31st, to stop the traffic coming in from China and to do the quarantine, which people forget. That gave us time, and people are arguing, did you squander the time? But what we do know is that did limit to a degree, and we can see that mathematically. That is why you probably get a cluster up in Seattle, but it may not have spread throughout the California and other places much. That is the boldest action. It's the one immediately the left. Biden, let's go. Biden said, you're racist, you're nativist, you're all that. When it turns out that Dr. Fauci, who now they're holding up as the oracle, which, hey, okay, fine. If that's it, the way it's going to be. But then Fauci said that's still the most important thing's been done. And Fauci led the discussion. And it kind of shut up the Morning Joe guys that, hey, the scientists were the people out here saying you had to shut down the Europe thing. Well, even I'm a close the border guy. We're building a border wall, but saying, hey, maybe there was another way you could do it because you got to worry about the capital markets here. When you hear all the inside stories and they're trying to chop up everybody on the White House staff, and we've got to get these stories up to date and frame them, I think, in an aggregation. The key point is that the scientists did lay out the facts. The capital markets guy said, hey, I think this will grow the markets. And the president made another bold decision that, hey, China, I'm going to shut this down now because I got to focus on what's going on here. Let's stop any any surge of this coming in, even if it's marginal. I want to shut it all down.
Exactly, and that's why part of the reason why I first said
bold action.
Bold action. Part of the reason why I said that wartime president is when I saw President Trump make that announcement, like you did, Steve, and realized that not a single person peeped up and said, well, wait a minute, you're quarantining people? No, look, you could take everyone with coronavirus and send them to Diego Garcia in the South Indian Ocean, and Americans wouldn't care.
They're fine with that.
They're fine with that.
Keep
us safe. Literally go and do it. It's bold action on safety. It's bold action economically, and if we want to even split up into lanes, there is still a containment aspect to this. Folks, what we don't want to do is start literally importing people that we think that have it from other countries. There's a mitigation aspect. As we talk about the popular buzzword today, or buzz phrase, is flattening out the curve, which you'll talk about a lot more on the show. Everyone's has a segment on that in the morning shows. But then also the economic security. It must be bold every single day.
Episode 29, hashtag War Room 2020. We want to hear your comments, your observations. Jason and Steve, we're going to return in just a moment.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Episode 29 at 3.8 million downloads. We want all your comments, all your reviews, all your observations. Go to hashtag War Room 2020. Remember, this is about building a community. We want everybody on board. It's, 2:37 in a wake-up? I didn't get my morning thing. We're going to get all this worked out, but most importantly, get some breaking news.
2:34.
2:34 in a wake-up. 2:34 in a wake-up. I'm going to wake up this morning.
And speaking of your wake up, I have some great listener feedback. Victoria Bentley tweets at us asking, Steve, what kind of antiviral moonshine are you swilling in that mason jar? Do tell.
That girl's from the South. You can tell. My secret formula brewed by Jack Maxey every morning. She knows a mason jar. Actually, it's a kimchi jar, but it is a mason jar.
She's from Cincy, but that's close enough.
That's close enough.
Southern Ohio's the South.
Southern Ohio, Copperhead City, the Queen City. Breaking news on The Guardian. Looking for the guys over in the War Room, Greg and Jack and the whole team. We got a whole operation right over here to the left. Bolsonaro, is this true? Bolsonaro, The Guardian reporting that President Bolsonaro tested positive for the virus. I just want to double check that. We got Greg is going to get to us. But let's go back as we track that down. That is not a good thing, right?
That very much falls into the anti-good category.
That's the anti-good category. I think if that's the case, I think the president's probably going to get a test today, right?
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. I don't know how The Guardian, how they think it got leaked out.
It is The Guardian, but, his press secretary has it.
Yes. No, that was, the press secretary definitely has it. So whether it gets tested or not. Let's go back. I would go back to wartime president. Also, I want to go back to some of the performances this morning on the morning analysis. But everything is the framing device now. Wartime president, he's stepping in. They're bold decisions that are being made. There's this negotiation on Capitol Hill. We're going to talk. So you got to triage this. You've got this global pandemic. You then have a economic crisis on top of that about supply chain and about the perturbations in the economy and everything shut down. You got a deep systemic in that. You now have a global, I think, financial crisis. I know the president doesn't think so. And the head of Citicorp, I stocked this down 50% in the last 6 weeks. Citicorp did so great in the 2008, bailed out like 9 times. But you're seeing markets all over the place. Credit markets, looks like the interest rates may go to zero, which is not a good thing for people looking to get their Social Security check in the future. But you got all this going on. You got geopolitical now with the oil crisis with Saudi Arabia and Russia. It looked like ganging up on. We're going to have Spencer Abraham on later in the show to discuss that. You now have the Chinese coming back hard, ladies and gentlemen, on this was a creation of the U.S. Army, of the Dr. Hatfield guys at Fort Detrick, that this was a bioweapon from the United States, not a bioweapon from Wuhan. Everything. So what do we got here?
Yeah, so I want to go back to one thing, just going back to the whole dynamic of the wartime presidency, because the other thing with this too is this means President Trump is going to have to make very tough decisions. He is going to have people who are the smartest medical experts on one side. He is going to have people who are the smartest fiscal and economic on the other side. He's going to have his national security people sometimes saying different things. He has to process all that information and make the right call. I think he made the right call with closing down the travel with Europe. We saw Italy is now literally closing down the entire country. The EU, it's basically one big open border. Once you get in, you can go around. They had to do this. So Bloomberg has a story out. I think it actually popped last night. They talk about the meeting. In fact, the headline is inside the White House meeting that led Trump to make his Oval Office speech. And the thing it goes to
Jennifer Jacobs, right?
Yes, Jennifer
Very
Jacobs.
well sourced.
The quote, here's the paragraph. The medical experts on his team were adamant. The best way to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus was to buy time by keeping Europeans out, they said, with the hope the virus may naturally ebb in the warmer weather, according to people familiar with the deliberations. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Larry Kudlow, the president's top economic advisor, pushed back strongly, saying the economic costs would be steep. They went back and forth on this, but the president listened to Ambassador Debbie Birx, who I've had the ability now to meet, and very impressive woman, ran her national AIDS and PEPFAR program doing the pushback. But Fauci was on board with this. Fauci, who again is, I would not call him a cheerleader in the slightest for the president. Deborah Birx was on board with this. This was not, this was not Jason Miller and Steve Bannon saying, "Hey, just close off the country to the world."
No, and this is why the media made it up as this is Stephen Miller, doing another travel ban, right? And when you look at it, and you haven't heard a peep out of the media, in the crucible of decision making, in that defining moment, right, in what I call the unforgiving minute, where you actually have to make a decision in the fog of war. One way leads to victory, the other way leads to defeat. This is what Trump has had from the beginning. It is a talent you cannot coach. It is a talent you either have or you don't have, right? One way leads to victory, the other way leads to defeat. You can see this throughout his career. You can see it throughout his presidency. And I can tell you, in those meetings, and they said they did in the cabinet room, when all these voices are coming at you, right? He sits there, he can go through all that. And this is where you don't see the mainstream media today. What have they been hammering on? Listen to the scientist. Listen to the scientists. We need the scientists. We need we need evidence-based. We need fact-based. Okay, I got it. That's what we've done on pandemic from day one. Remember, the whole reason we did the pandemic show is to say we want to get all the information out there. What Trump said, nothing is inevitable. That decision may be one of the key decisions. Was it practice enough? Was the stagecraft correct? Was it said right? Should Mnuchin may have had more time? Maybe you should delay it to Thursday. Hey, maybe all that stuff. But the central beating heart of the decision is his default position is the right position. Let's go back to January 31st. Joe Biden, and I don't want to politicize this because it's not about politics. Joe Biden on the 31st of January doesn't make that decision. Bernie Sanders on the 31st of January doesn't make that decision. Hillary Clinton on the 31st of January doesn't make that decision. On March 11th, the evening, that's when he gave the speech, led to Black Thursday on the 12th. Capital markets got rolled. Those guys don't make that decision. Trump made that decision. And it was Birx and Fauci who were in the room. And it was Birx that was adamant, saying we have to do this. This is the way we stop. This is the way if we're going to get ahead of it and shut down. Yes, clearly it's here. And there's all kinds of things on testing and these other things we have to do. But that was in the cauldron of battle, in that crucible of where leaders are formed, what Peter Baker said. And I'd like to have Peter Baker have the follow-on thing now that Trump made the right call.
The other thing, too, is if you know President Trump, it's not easy to get into his inner circle. It's not easy for him to go and take this. But as president, as the commander-in-chief, you have to analyze the data and the recommendations being put in front of you. I mean, Steve Mnuchin, our Treasury Secretary, very serious player. Larry Kudlow, National Economic Advisor, very serious player. Dr. Fauci, serious player. Dr. Birx, Ambassador Birx, very serious player. You're looking at all these different competing ideas and strategies, and he looked and said, Ambassador Birx is someone who's been in the not in the cabinet, but part of the administration, but not someone who's been kind of his right-hand person. I think you have the right idea. I love your presentation. I love the ramifications and what it's going to do to protect Americans. I'm going with your call. That shows that President Trump put politics aside. When everything's on the table and it matters, he's going to make the right decision.
Now, here's the thing. And look, and here's the other thing about the meetings. And they make it out like it's all this terrible stuff. The New York Times, the Washington Post, even Bloomberg. If you look at it and see it and you contextualize it, it actually shows you a team that actually is working. Everybody that had a role said the right thing. Now, here's what I really like about it: that Mnuchin and Kudlow did warn him about what would happen. Now, here's what I think is imperative: on the finance and economic side, bold strokes. You need the same bold strokes you're taking on the science side. Okay. We're going to take a minute here. Hashtag War Room 2020. Also go to the site to download the podcast. leave a comment or review. We're going to be back in just a second.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Live from Capitol Hill, it is episode 29, War Room 2020. Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller. Jason, the communication strategist for 2016, greatest come from behind victory in presidential history, also the transition communication director. Live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem broadcast throughout the nation on AmericasVoice.news, which is the streaming platform of the Trump movement, and now Dish Channel 219 in 40 or 50 million homes. Also FM 99.1 and 103.9 in Chicago and the Chicago area. Jason Miller, we're going to be very honored to be joined by Spencer Abraham, a former U.S. Senator from Michigan, also former Energy Secretary. Senator Abraham, sir, I want to play a clip here and then have you respond to this. By the way, before we play that clip, it's just reporting on The Guardian. They're not confirming it in Brazil now, but it looks like President Bolsonaro maybe have tested positive. And he's down in Mar-a-Lago this weekend. We're getting more of that in a moment, trying to get the ambassador from Brazil on the phone here for the next segment. Let's go to this clip, Jason.
Yeah, and this is from yesterday on CNBC with Hess Company CEO John Hess.
You mentioned the importance of the shale industry and specifically in our energy industry at large. Is there a chance that, instead of pitting themselves against one another, the Saudis and the Russians did this to cripple our industry? Just when we get to energy independence, they pull the rug out beneath the price of the underlying commodity.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a major objective of what's going on right now. But it's not just the U.S. shale producers that are going to be hurt by this oil price crash.
Okay. It's the first time it's ever been said publicly. I said this from the very beginning. MBS went gangster. This is the Saudis and the Russians. Obviously, they're at each other's throats. But the target of this, I keep saying, I love the president. He's the wartime president. This is how we're framing it. The trade-off in the lower oil price as a tax cut to the consumer versus the complete evisceration of the president's policy of full spectrum energy dominance. Full spectrum energy dominance. And this is why we wanted to have Spencer Abraham on today, because he knows not just the oil and gas business, he also knows the nuclear power business. The two things that the United States of America could be full spectrum energy dominant and change the whole path of our economy and the American future for our kids and grandkids. We've allowed foreign powers to take us on. Spencer Abraham, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Steve, good to be with you. Thank you.
So is Chairman Hess of Hess Oil, I think his grandfather started the company. It's one of the most prominent families in the business. Wrong in saying that, hey, he thinks that the target here was the fracking business, the shale oil business in the United States?
Well, I think it is very likely the case. And I think that, the Saudis tried this once before, tried to really flood the market so that prices would drop and shale companies would not be able to survive. It didn't work. Now I think it's the Russians' turn, and they're the ones who, the Saudis were trying to actually boost prices when they went to the OPEC meeting last week, but the Russians refused, and the Saudis, responded. But I think the Russians in particular are trying to target U.S. shale. They dominated this industry. They don't like the fact that both on oil and natural gas, their dominance has been replaced by America's strength. And they see us vulnerable right now, and I think that's precipitated this effort to bring down prices, which in turn's bringing down a whole sector.
Well, it's two things. I want to get to nuclear power in a second and the mining of uranium, but I want to stay on oil. What would be your recommendation? You're one of the most revered guys in this industry, and you've already been Secretary of Energy and President Bush. If you had the president's ear, what would be your recommendation now that we're kind of in this financial crisis on top of the virus, the pandemic, and on top of the economic crisis? What would be your advice to the president today?
Well, I think he needs to pressure, our ally here, which is the Saudis, who depend so much on America for so many other things, to not get into a bidding war with the Russians and to push the other way. And I think that's the one tool, in his toolbox, because I think we have a lot of influence
And
there.
what would you in that
again,
in that influence? What would you want? What would be the ask? What would you want the president to talk to MBS about?
About basically reducing production. I mean, I think what we need is to see the OPEC do what they were planning to do, which is to cut back production. If the Russians don't have that much more they can produce. What they didn't want to do was cut production, but the Saudis have the capacity to really increase production. They say they're going to do it. We don't need that to happen right now in this very weak and fragile market. So that'd be number one. Number two, I think
Secretary Abraham, can we have you stay over for the next segment? I want to get to in this more depth and also in uranium. Secretary Spencer Abraham, former Energy Secretary, is going to join us after the break. Jason and Steve, episode 29 on War Room 2020. We will return in just a moment.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Welcome back live from Capitol Hill. We're with Secretary Spencer Abraham. We lost Secretary Abraham.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Sir, you were just going through the advice you would give the president. Can we take it from the top? Because I want people to hear this. Obviously, a lot of folks in town listen to this, a lot of folks in the White House. Things very important. The advice you would give him first for the oil patch and this attack coming from the Russians and some from the Saudis, what would be your advice to help bail this out?
Well, I think we need to send a shot across the Russians' bow. I mean, this isn't the only time the Russians have tried to undercut the American energy sector. You referenced nuclear power a minute or two ago, Stephen, and what's happened there is really injurious to national security. The Russians, for a long period of time now, along with former Soviet countries like Kazakhstan, have been diluting the uranium market to such a degree that now almost all the uranium that is used in U.S. nuclear plants comes from it's 99%. Much of it from Russian FSU countries.
Hold it. This is what I understand. The President of the United States laid out a very strong dictate when we first took over. I want full spectrum energy dominance, not independence. I want full spectrum energy dominance. How can a industry that we essentially created and is so central not just to national security but to cheap energy prices, lower energy costs for consumers, how can we be totally beholden? I mean, this is worse than knowing the Chinese make all of our generic drugs. You're telling me we import all the uranium when we have so much uranium here?
That's right, because the market price for uranium has fallen so much that American mining companies, which have the capability of supplying almost all the uranium we need, can't operate. They can't profit. They can't make a profit in the current market environment. And that's because state-supported companies in Russia and Kazakhstan in particular are diluting the market with their exports. And there's a motive to this. They're not making money. What they're trying to do is to take over the supply chain. Once that happens, then they can move prices all they want because they'll have put the competitors out of business. And if you don't have to operate and adhere to the kind of laws and regulations we have in America, and if the state supports you, as it does in Russia and in Kazakhstan in terms of the uranium mining, you can sell it for anything you want.
So
but once you dominate the market, then you can also sell it for what you want, and that can be a very high price. And it puts America and it puts all the importers of this uranium in jeopardy because it could be withheld. And we've seen now what happens if the supply chain is one where the dependency is on countries who are not necessarily our friends.
Okay, so this is where now you got to help me out. We have two extraction industries. The shale/fracking, which has created tremendous value on the equity market, has created tens of thousands of high-paying jobs, okay? And we have, I guess, uranium mining also. Two extraction industries. We've allowed our enemies, right, or the Russians who, we couldn't work out any deal with them to be an ally against China, so now they're on the opposite side of the football. What would you advise the president to do about these two extraction industries? How do we protect it from foreign influence, and what are we supposed to do to turn this around right now?
Well, first, I think the uranium is the most vital situation simply because we're 99% dependent. And the president passed on an opportunity to impose quotas that would require the United States nuclear companies to buy 25% of the uranium from U.S. sources. He passed on that last year, but now he's come forward with an alternative proposal. He's identified the problem. He's asking Congress to support the creation of a uranium reserve, strategic reserve, and that would buy from U.S. companies. But that's going to take a while to set up because Congress, first of all, has to approve it. And I have questions in my mind about whether or not a Nancy Pelosi-led House is going to approve appropriations to do this. If she doesn't, if the House and the Democrats don't go along, I think the president then has to take action directly, which he can under a variety of his executive powers to either impose quotas, which would require buying a certain percentage of uranium from U.S. companies, or to impose under the Defense Production Act the kind of uranium purchasing that we do in other areas to protect national security, because that's where we're immediately dependent. I mean, on the oil side, as I said, I think we need to call out the Russians and we need to pressure the Saudis to cut back production so that in fact the prices rise enough to let our industries, come back into play.
But hang on for a second on the second one. First one is pretty well defined. The second one, John Hess said in that interview that we teed up this segment on that I thought it was 50% of the rig count could go away in 90 to 100 days. There was some draconian amount of the rig count, both the financial pressure and the pressure from Russia. So and this is our framing of the president. He's now a wartime president. One of the keys in wartime is you have to have your own energy sources that you don't have to worry about the world. We don't have to worry about the world getting our uranium. We don't have to worry about getting our drugs from China. We don't have to worry about getting our mass from China. We can't worry about not being energy dominant, and that is the fracking business. What would you tell him to keep that rig count? We can't have the rig count drop 50%. One, the economy can't afford it. Number two, we can't afford it for national security. So what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, the rigs won't disappear. I mean, they'll be there. What we've got to have is a price that makes it profitable for companies to actually use the rigs. And so there's some immediate things they can do, and I think they're thinking of them. I think they can, for instance, start instead of selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve into the market, they could reverse that and start buying oil for the Strategic Reserve. There's still a little bit of capacity there to fill. They can find ways to support companies in the industry that are teetering here, some of the smaller shale companies. But at the end of the day, the real issue is price, because companies can't operate if they can't make a profit, right. And that comes back to the actions of OPEC, which seemed headed in the right direction until a week ago. And then the Russians, at the last second, pulled the carpet out from the strategy of cutting back production to bring prices back into a reasonable range. And I think the Russians are the culprits. But we can't, at this point, we got to use our tools to get the Saudis and others to take action to address that.
Secretary Abrams, thank you very much. We're going to cut this out and throw it up on social media. We'll get it to you. Thank you very much, Secretary Spencer Abraham.
All right, thanks. Good to be with you.
Thank you, sir. We'll return in just a moment.
War Room 2020. Bannon, Miller, Kassan.
Live from Capitol Hill, it's Friday, the 13th of March, the year of our Lord 2020, episode 29. Jason, that's where we had Secretary Spencer Abrahams on here, and we've had Rosemary Gibson, we've had him. Here it is. You're a wartime president. We now know China makes all our APIs for our drugs. China makes all our generic drugs. China is the railhead of our manufacturing base. China makes all the masks. They make all the gloves. Somehow Wall Street and the corporatists have shipped everything over to China. Now we look in the energy sector where President Trump says we need to be full spectrum dominant. We now see in both the uranium industry and now in oil and gas and the fracking business. It's Russia and some Saudi Arabia. Russia and the uranium and oil are coming to take hard shots at us. They're trying to put the fracking business, they're going to pump it at $25 or $30 to put the fracking business out of business because the break-even cost is $40 a share. Big, bold actions.
Exactly. We also have some breaking news. Fox News is independently reporting that Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has tested positive for coronavirus.
Do you tell the president to go over to Bethesda today or Walter Reed to get a test?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Second big piece of news here, Attorney General Bill Barr is home after he and Ivanka met with an Australian official. CDC is not recommending that he be tested at this point. He's feeling great, not showing any symptoms. It was very brief. And then also to the sports world, which we haven't even touched on this, but Bill Simmons from The Ringer had a great podcast last night about how yesterday changed the sports world forever. As we saw, everything from March Madness to the NBA, NHL, soccer, everything cancel out. The Masters is postponed for this year.
Wow.
But the issue then, of course, becomes when does it actually get played? You have a rest of the season that's already
Well,
on the
Augusta,
books.
I think the course closes down in May, right? They take the summer off down there. The summer is shut down, those hot, humid summers. And, hey, if you play it, you're not going to have the azaleas. I think with their branding, I think they skipped it in 1943 and 44, 2 years in the war.
And also, President Trump just tweeted out a few seconds ago, I'll be having a news conference today at 3 p.m. at the White House on the coronavirus.
Okay, that's it. I'm having a press conference. This
Yes.
is big, bold. He's stepping into this. This is his Churchill moment, is it not, sir?
This is where he has been successful. Every step in this is when it's strong, declarative moves. That's what people want to see right now. We're past the time on the consoling talk. This is the time where nobody is going to question or second guess you with the strong moves. Keep it up.
Big and bold. Okay, it is hashtag War Room 2020. Also, we want to go to all the platforms. Jason, we're on every podcast platform. We're the only show out there that you can get it everywhere else. You can get it on Dish 219. We're very proud of being part of the Dish family, and really thank the guys at America's Voice.News. They've gone out of their way to help us get this production up and running. Also, the John Fredericks Radio Network, all the John Fredericks Radio team down in Richmond. They're buying stations left and right, putting us up. We really appreciate that. Also, and by the way, so is Bolsonaro? Any other breaking? Give me that.
Just
give me that breaking news.
No, it's a breaking news. It's the biggest positive thing today. Roche has been approved by the FDA for new coronavirus testing 10 times faster than what we previously had. This is great news, guys. This is the buried lead. It's the last 30 seconds of the show. It's huge. Go read the story. This is a great development for the country.
We've got it up on War Room 2020, a new testing device by an entrepreneurial company. Okay, we got War Room Pandemic is next.